For our listeners, this is a content warning. Throughout this podcast, we touch on subjects related to trauma, misogyny, racism and medical racism, sexual misconduct, residential schools, as well as many aspects of death and dying. Should you need them, there is a list of resources in our show notes. Most importantly, as you listen, take a break when you need to, and please take care of yourselves. We'd like to acknowledge that this podcast is produced and recorded across the land known as Canada. These traditional and treaty territories are full of rich Indigenous histories, home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We embrace the opportunity to share this story in a respectful, inclusive, and culturally appropriate way.
I'm Danielle Wilson-Brown. This podcast is about my mom, Marion Brown. She is a visionary, perpetual student, the biggest nerd, and adventure seeker. She is in a one-life stand with my dad, Fred. She is a mother of 3 and new grandmother of 2 beautiful grandbabies. She is a TV and film producer, former musician, family therapist, governance consultant, and ex-council member of Githatha Nation in BC. Oh, and by the way, she also has pulmonary hypertension. There is no cure, and it will take her life. And so, we're going to share our story and this end-of-life journey with you. I hope you'll join me, Danielle Wilson-Brown, my mom, and some special guests as we begin to discuss death, dying, and above all, living. Welcome to Before I Go. Hello, and welcome back to Before I Go. I really want to start this episode with acknowledging we've said self-care is mandatory. And if you tuned into our last episode, our conversation with Myrna was so authentic, so genuine, so deep, and it brought up a lot of emotions. And so I just want to emphasize the importance of taking care of ourselves. We have listed resources in our episode descriptions. And so I really want to let you know that our mental health matters, and taking the time, go to a counselor or go to the water or going out into the forest and screaming. I don't know. Whatever is good for you, find it, do it. Because after our conversation last time, I know I needed to figure out, how do I deal with all of these emotions that, were brought up in me? And so I just wanted to take the time to say thank you. Thank you for sitting in the uncomfortable with us. Thank you for joining us in these hard conversations. How are you doing, Mom?
Part of what I do is I take a deep breath and just sort of let that hum out because it allows my body to know that I'm in a safe space and I am safe. Because yes, it did bring up a lot of painful memories, but it's also dealing with everyday life. My brother is very, very sick right now. And we were at the point where we didn't even know if he'd survive. And he's not out of the woods yet. And we celebrate all of those small milestones. And so carrying all of that and dealing with, running a business and doing this podcast, I have to acknowledge all parts of myself because I'm feeling a little bit scattered. Yeah, it's a lot to deal with, but we do it on a daily basis. We sit in the uncomfortableness and we deal with the feelings as they come up. We feel the feelings. And like we said in previous episodes, there are no good or bad feelings. And there was a moment in this week, Danielle, I hope you don't mind if I share, but Danny was angry. And it's like, be angry, be sad, be everything you need to be for your own mental health. Because part of the issue that we had this week was because you were strong enough to carry the burden, does that mean you should be the one to carry it? the burden of many, and that we have to acknowledge in ourselves when we're tired, when we're sad, when we're angry. Because the strong Indigenous women, boy, they'll just constantly throw things onto our shoulders and we will pick them up and we will carry them. We'll be the first in the family to get there, to go to university. We'll be the first to get into an industry that doesn't hold space for us at all. And I'm really glad I have a daughter and a best friend who keeps me in check, who is my touchstone. But I'm also very aware that I don't want to put that burden on her shoulders because she's strong enough to carry that. Danielle, how are you?
I feel like it's almost another common saying where this emotional roller coaster that I can't get off of, feelings are meant to be felt. Because the other lesson we've learned is that all of these feelings, they're fleeting. They do end. I do stop being angry. I do stop being sad. Because once we move through all of those, I get to celebrate the fact that my uncle woke up this week. And when I said goodnight to him, he said, "Love you." And this is after being told he might not be able to talk. He might not be able to move. But he woke up and recognized me and told me he loved me. So I get to celebrate that. I get to appreciate that. I get to show immense gratitude for the medical field of bringing him back. On top of that gratitude is welcoming back our guest. Myrna, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming back here, continuing our conversation from last time, because that was such a powerful conversation. The raw honesty that you have shown us, that you have shared with us. Please know I'm so proud of that. Proud to be in the presence of such a strong Indigenous woman who has gone through so much and is willing to share that with us. Thank you so much for coming back. How are you?
Thank you for inviting me back. And I just want to say I heard you both. I mean, times are anytime I think we're dealing with loss or the potential for loss, I think sometimes, at least for me, like one loss triggers all the losses. And so it feels like it's all compounded, or you know what I mean? Like, so it's not one, it's all, always. I hear you. I hear you. And I just want to acknowledge that. Honestly, right now I have to say, like, my heart, feel my spirit feels pretty light. I think a big part of that is, I was up in, Kitcatla last week. I was there for 3 days, and I'm just back at work after being off for, like, 6 months, like, taking some time away. It was so awesome. It was so good. I mean, like, we know there's pain. We know there's been, like, harm in our communities. And also, there's so much love and, like, desire to heal and desire to bring people home and reconnect, and I really was picking that up, like, I walked through the community. I took my friend Charmaine with me. We walked through the community and, like, children came and hugged us and talked to us, and Charmaine is really into, like, sports, so they were talking about basketball because, as you know, basketball is huge in your community, right? And so everyone was excited to talk about basketball with her. There was one elder we met on the road, and he was, like, well, kinda wandering around. He said he didn't wanna stay home 'cause, somehow he managed to turn the language on his TV to Spanish, and, he's like, "I don't know how to fix it." And Charmaine's like, "Oh, we'll be your tech support." And so, like, all of a sudden, now we're at this old man's house, and we're fixing his TV. But it was amazing. People took care of us. They fed us really well. I haven't had so much panic in my life, and received us so well. And when I did my last training session with the community, there was like a whole row of elders, and two of them approached me individually to say, "You see all these old people here?" And I said, "Yeah, we all grew up together. We were children together. We were all taken together too, like, at different times and different schools, but we ultimately had that same experience, and we've all found our way home. And, that was really like hearing them say that, like, we found our way home and we were children. We once were children together. Like, I could all of a sudden, like, see all of them as children. Like, when I looked up and looked at them, I didn't see these elderly people, I saw children, and they were so fun, and I played a song, and I invited everyone who was able-bodied to get up and, shake their bodies, and everyone wanted to dance, and people started dance. It was wonderful. Anyway, it really filled my cup being in your community, Marion, really filled my cup. It was such a beautiful experience, and then I remembered when as I was, like, leaving, I remembered why I do what I do.
Gets a little homesick when I you know, uh, I come from this incredible nation, the Gatlatla people. The village is La Clan, so, going to La Clan for me is going home because it's stepping back into this community that existed for 13,000 plus years and knowing that the trauma, the hurt, the pain that we feel now has been, we've survived all of that and we're still here. So, yeah, thank you so much for going up into my neck of the woods. I'm very proud to be Gitlatla. And, of course, they were welcoming to you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can't tell you how much I appreciate, you offering those kinds of workshops. We touched on last time the work that you do, the work that you've done. But if we can go back to what was your experience in law school
Oh my gosh.
and starting your practice? And
Well, as I exhale, I could feel all the joy. I was just I was just reliving, just leave my body. I'm kidding. Like, it was tough. Like, I mean, we like, many of us have to be the first to be in professions, organizations that don't necessarily welcome us. Well, it was the same in law school. Like, I went to law school in the late '90s, and, I think back then there were a lot of white students who thought that the indigenous students were taking their friend's spot, like, because a UBC at the time had designated so many seats had to go to indigenous law students. I think there was, like, resentment from some people and this belief that we were in a special program or a modified program, and we weren't. We were doing all the same classes they were. We had to meet the same standards that they did. It was isolating, it was difficult. I was a single parent, I was also working, so it was exhausting. I think like many, many indigenous people being like one of the few or the only one in any environment, it's lonely, it's exhausting because 'cause you're always on, like, you're code switching all the time, like, your authenticity you already know isn't welcome, so you're like, "How do I how do I adapt to survive and succeed in this place?" So you sometimes have to I think sometimes we can lose ourselves because we're trying to be the thing that can succeed and survive, and the profession was the same. Like, in the early days of my practice, it was very much the same. Trying to be like everybody else, trying to fit in, trying to do as they do. A lot of the stuff didn't really even align with my values and what I knew to be true. I would say for me, that created more wounding, like, because I was doing things I didn't even believe in. I was doing things that didn't align with my core values. I was behaving in a manner that was like, who was that? And why was I doing that? And the more I did it, like, the more it harmed me. So authenticity, I think, is powerful. Like, how much of our existence or how much of our how we do what we do is authentic and how much of it is performative to impress white people or to impress men or to impress powerful white men who, like, let's be honest, particular I'm sure in so many professions, but especially law, tend to be the leaders. They tend to be the managing partners, the people who make a lot of decisions, the political leads.
I remember learning pretty early on, especially in school, of if I'm this social chameleon, if I'm able to switch masks and learn to fit in different cliques, groups, organizations, different environments, then I was able to essentially move up, that social hierarchy. Later on in life, it's our responsibility to work on it and to shift it. And let me tell you, it's incredibly difficult to do that because it wasn't until later on in my life that I realized I had internalized misogyny, and it took years to overcome that.
You were saying that you assimilate essentially to work your way up. And I think for people in my generation, it was we tried to disappear. We tried to do it quietly. You don't bring attention to yourself. So I became a really, really good, you know, worker in the background, the one that kind of made things work, but didn't call any attention to myself. And I think that's what my generation had to deal with. I think when you were talking about law, very similar to mine, because in the late '80s, early '90s, I started my career in broadcasting, and I tell you, there weren't any Indigenous people there. There were a few women there, and it was very difficult to have a voice, um, and not be judged for who you were and who you brought to that space. Because I'm sure you had these ideas of why you wanted to become a lawyer, but acknowledging that these spaces weren't held for you.
I mean, everything you're saying is true. Like, everything you're saying is, I think, the lived experience of a lot of professionals. As soon as I started to be me, talk like me, share my stories, I mean, the greatest success financially I have ever experienced was once I started to be me. All of a sudden, the money started rolling in. Like, if we're talking about like trauma, there's trauma of money too, particularly when you come from a life of poverty, right? There's financial trauma, and so some kind of financial healing came through my authenticity. But I think a lot of us assimilate and code switch to cope. But I think those coping mechanisms ultimately are going to fail you after a time. And you're going to have like a moment where you're like, okay, am I going to be me, or am I just going to continue to pretend? And then at that point, we make a decision.
We've been working on, taking away the stigma of the word privilege because I have it. I know where my family is from. I have both of my parents in my life. I have closer relationships with my siblings. I have all of these privileges. It's taken a long time to get away from, oh, that's a bad word. We don't use that word. Being able to say I'm Githatha, being able to know where my village is. There is a power in that. Using that power has been a lifelong learning opportunity of what am I going to do with this power? What am I going to do with this privilege? The amount of effort, the amount of work all of us have done to get to this point. That's an amazing milestone, Myrna, of realizing once you are authentic to yourself, once you figured out who you are and how you want to present to yourself to the world, your career started to take off. And that's amazing. How did you get to that point?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't think it's like one moment, one thing, one event. And I don't even know that it's necessarily conscious. Like, I know, like, I was looking at the state of my life and I was like, had to ask myself, like, this is why, I really promote emotional intelligence and self reflection and self awareness, because I think that gives us real insights into where we're wounded, but also the wisdom that waits within us to help us like level up to the next thing and do the next thing and use the gifts that we were given. But I was like, is this who I want to be? Is this how I want to live my life? Like, I don't know what's better or like what's next or how good it can be, or I'm not even sure I believe that the best is yet to come. But I don't wanna be this, and I don't wanna do this. And at first, it was kind of like I was presenting what I felt or what I thought and what I believed as kind of like a flexible idea, like, I'm not really married to it, but I kinda think this, you know? I kinda think that we're, like, traumatizing people as lawyers. I think we should change. I think we could do better. So my voice was kinda meek, and I was kind of, like, wobbly in what I was trying to stand up for. I couldn't stand up quite yet. And then as the more I spoke about it and the more people challenged me or agreed with me, the stronger I got in my voice. And then the more I tapped into what is wounded about me and how do my wounds drive a lot of the decisions that I was making, how do I repair that? And then how do I repair relationships? And then I started to think like way bigger beyond just me, Myrna, and this life. I started to think about my family and my extended family and then my nation, my people, and then all our people, indigenous people, and my profession. I thought like what kind of wisdom would we benefit from if we were, tapped into some wisdom? I wish it was like a straight line, but it was like a lot of zigzagging and sometimes a U-turn and all of those things. And I mean, and I'd like to say like I am like firm and all of the things. And like I woke up and life is amazing and I found the key to whatever. No. Like I said to you last time, every day is a choice. Do I want to live this way? I could choose to be drained. I could choose to see all the racism in the world. I could choose to see the sadness. I could go into indigenous communities and do work with them and see their pain and feel their pain. It's really easy to do that as somebody who's really dialed into other people's emotions, but I choose to see the hope and the possibility. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I wish it for all of us, and I wish for it early, but you know what? This is also colonization. Like, this is it's taking us a little longer, but you know what? Intergenerational healing is happening and it's manifesting in seeing how younger people are picking these things up like way earlier than we did.
You know, where I started my career, sort of just quietly, just doing my job and not bringing any attention to myself. The thing with being an Indigenous person in, well, I guess, in an urban setting in the 70s was we were the only Indigenous kids in the school. We were the only, my parents raised us much like, new immigrants. He knew, my dad knew that education was going to get us out of wherever we were. And the stronger we became, that was through knowledge. That was through, and I completely agree that the more authentic you become, the more successful you are. And that regardless of whatever the matrix is, whatever the measurement is. I don't use money to measure my success. I use relationships and I have incredible relationships. So, I agree that the world, the universe opens up to you once you become who you are and who you were meant to be. And you're right, it's that choice. You choose. Everything in your life is your choice.
I think a lot of us don't think enough about how everything is a choice. Even when we choose not to do something, that is a choice that we're making. When we think we're just being passive or indecisive or delayed, that's a choice too. Right. And so everything is a choice. And so I appreciate what you said because that is a reminder like that I should take credit for what I've achieved. And I mean, it's a habitual thing to like acknowledge it's important, right? It's really important not to overlook our own achievements and our own successes and our own progress.
I'm Danielle Wilson Brown, and this is Before I Go, a podcast where my mom, Marion Brown, and I have some of the most profound conversations of our lives about her end of life journey.
I really wish more Indigenous women and men would talk about what it was that we had to learn to be the successes that we are because too often, I would say media likes to present us as being victims for women, indigenous women, like, missing and murdered on social services and all of those things, like, we're poor in all the ways in which one can be poor or impoverished. I really wish more Indigenous people talked about all the ways in which they advance their own healing, whether that is in relationships or in their own bodies or in their careers or financially. Like, so, in so many ways, people are creating the thing, becoming the thing that they never saw. So, like, sometimes we hear people talk about this, right? Like, they say things like, you can't be what you don't see. And I don't believe, like, there was a time when I believed it, I don't believe it anymore. Like, if that was true, we would never be the things that we became because we didn't see these things. So the question for us was like, "Holy, can I even do this?" And then you're like, "I don't know, but I'm gonna go for it and try and see what happens." So, like, we don't always see it, but we have to believe that it's possible.
Hmm. We talk about choice. We talk about, you know, the experiences and the journey that brings us to this point in our life. So, how did the choice of trauma informed lawyer begin? Where did that start?
Oh my gosh. These are big questions. You know what? If I'm being honest, I really think it started at, like, conception, honestly. Like, the trauma was already there. It was in the egg that I once was. It was there when my mom was, like, growing me and when she had me, and then on and on and on. And I think what happened for me anyway was I just I just knew that I didn't wanna hurt people. I didn't wanna hurt people the way I was seeing lawyers hurt people and the way I was seeing judges and police officers hurt people, and I like, racism just infuriated me, anti-Indigenous racism, and I just thought at some point, I thought, "If I can connect these people to their own humanity, maybe they'll treat my people better in these spaces." And so that was really what fueled mostly the Trauma Informed Lawyer podcast, but before that, like, when I started to talk about, like, what is trauma? Why do we as a profession need to understand trauma and respond to it? It was really, like, because I had already changed. I had changed how I met with clients, how I met with witnesses. I had changed how I made decisions around client files. And I just found it to be a way better experience because I centered relationships and I centered humanity in this profession and in the work that I do. And what I've come to understand, and what I believe really drives all of my interactions is recognizing that I'm always in relationship with people. I'm in relationship with everyone in this room right now. Right? And, like, so what kind of relationship do I want that to be? I'm so motivated by energy, like, I've often tell my team, like, we could talk about money for a second because for me, coming from abject poverty, being a teen mom, I was told I would be on welfare my whole life. When I looked in my community, there's a street called Social Aid Avenue, like, that is how much like, poverty is so entrenched in who we are. And I saw how poverty restricted mobility, like restricted freedom, restricted opportunity, movement, possibility, all those things. Even like dreaming. I think so many of us didn't even dream because we couldn't afford to, if that makes any sense. And so now like when I take jobs, like sure, okay, I became successful financially, career-wise, that's great. But like so many of us, what I get goes back because I see money as like currency, it's always moving, but I only also wanna make good money. So I get people coming to me, making me offers, and I say no, because I always ask, "Is this good money? Do I want that energy? No." If it's no, then no. Doesn't matter how much it is. So everything is like currency and it's flowing and it's energy and my relationships are exactly the same. I everyone I encounter, whether I'm talking to a room full of like hundreds of people or 5 people, I recognize I'm in relationship and I have a responsibility for how I show up and how the feeling I leave you with. And you also have a responsibility to me because reciprocity, it goes both ways. And so when I embrace that, which I believe is an indigenous principle, like we're all in relationship with each other all the time. It's just like who chooses to acknowledge it and who chooses to ignore it. I chose to finally acknowledge it. And then I recognized the responsibility I had just by being in relationship and being committed to reciprocity. And from there, I had to tell people, you want to be happier, you want to be more successful, you want to make more money, you want your mental health to be intact by the time you come out of this profession, this is how you do it.
It's so strange to me that it's such a revolutionary concept to be human centric in these industries, right? And we are dealing with the medical professionals right now, and it's we're obviously very appreciative that they're able to bring this knowledge and to bring this treatment to help patients. But to be so medicine and patient focused is in itself harmful, and it's very black and white. But those relationships are with humans. They are with people. It's like these systems are still harming our people. They're still harming our communities, whether it's through the court system, whether through the medical system. And that's why we have these conversations. So bringing that sense of, you know, psychological safety to courtrooms, to patients' rooms. What has been your experience with that?
Well, can I just say, like, as much as I have felt really frustrated, at times hopeless when I see when articles kind of like hit the media, particularly if we're talking about anti Indigenous racism in healthcare, it's so disheartening, right? Because every time we see it, every time we hear it, we're like, "Oh my god, I hope nothing medically horrible ever happens to me that I need, an ER because how will they treat me just by virtue of how I look when I show up," right? Like, I'm very indigenous looking. I think a lot of people feel that way. Like, we shouldn't fear the systems that are designed to help us. I think law and medicine have those 2 things in common. They're both designed to help us, but yet we fear them, and we fear them because they lack credibility when it comes to treating us like human beings and denying us dignity. Like, it's systemic and it's historical and it's ongoing and it's horrible. So then you see people trying to out in Ontario, like I saw some news release not that long ago about how they created their own indigenous clinic. Like, so people are starting to carve off their own indigenous service providers, right? And there's like also the same thing, like in Toronto, Aboriginal Legal Services. Like people are carving off here in British Columbia. Here in BC, there's like the BC First Nations Justice Council. Everyone's starting to create these niche service providers because they recognize, I think, like if we're being honest, they recognize that there is so much anti-Indigenous racism that we have to go create something of our own so we can hopefully guarantee that we're going to be treated like human beings when we show up into those spaces and need those services because we're not going to get them over here in this mainstream space. So I think like that's one of the things that how we can interpret that, and it's easy to do. I have more hope than I've had before. There's a lot of reasons to be enraged. There's a lot of reasons to be really disappointed. I mean, I've had many experiences also trying to be like an advocate for family when I've had to take them to the hospital and my great grandmother didn't speak English and like having to interpret for her and communicate how much pain she was in and all of these things. And even like my mom and her treatment and how many times I've sat there wondering like if she was a white woman, would she have been treated different in this hospital room? Yes, all of that. And I'm seeing a real shift. Like, yeah, I started off as the trauma informed lawyer, like doing the trauma informed lawyer podcast. But the reality is, like, I do these conferences every spring in Vancouver. It's called Justice as Trauma. I host it. Like, I literally take money out of my savings and I bring together about 300 people from across the world to come and talk about how they are centering humanity and teaching themselves and each other about how to navigate trauma or traumatic spaces. And at first, it was predominantly community activists, advocates, lawyers, judges, law enforcement. But now, like last year, I had so many health providers, health regulators. There's 5 in this province. Like, although their individual interest or their collective body's interest in this work is great, but honestly, I think until we mandate this, like, it has to be somehow entrenched in law. It's mandated that you have to get this education, that you have to do like, you have to actually be in community, maybe be in relationship with Indigenous people, not just, like, deliver services to them. I don't think we're gonna get the change that we're hoping for or the change that we need. From a systems level, I don't know how any change would stick, especially right now when the call to be even more dehumanized and disconnected and us versus them, like, divisive is stronger than I've ever seen it.
I have to agree with that. Especially things that are happening south of the border. The fact of the matter is that it's only happening verbally because in Canada it's still occurring. They're just not as verbal about it. They don't have all of the same platforms that exist in the U.S. I like the idea of, let's figure out how to mandate this. But the fact of the matter is that when it comes to change like this, it happens one person at a time. And if you can connect with one person and change the way their perspective on how they exist in these areas, because, as humans, it's messy. If you're going to do anything with the human centered approach, it's messy. We're going to make mistakes. And, part of what we need to learn to do is make mistakes, acknowledge we made a mistake, tell them what we learned from it. And I think people like yourself, people who have educated themselves in these various systems are the ones who are going to stand up and help our people make meaningful change. That's where my hope is. My hope is that there are enough people learning from the experiences they've had through life to be able to offer hope to other people.
And I really appreciate hearing about physicians are starting to contact you. And that's amazing because, we talk about the issues that still exist towards the end of the conversation, talking about hope because we need to hang on to it. If there's any kind of sustainability in the work that we do, the advocacy that we do, it's that sense of hope, So there is hope in physicians, medical staff, nurses taking the initiative to acknowledge the issues that are still prevalent and wanting to address it. Because mom's favorite saying, one of them, we can't fix what we don't acknowledge. And we need to start acknowledging all of these, And so have you started acknowledging the work that you've done in any universities or colleges or with any other law students?
I mean, definitely, I think we have to recognize, right? We've got to recognize in ourselves and each other. I mean, I think it's just a common experience. We don't recognize our achievements enough usually, like, because there's still some wounds there that sometimes, tell you, don't like hold yourself up too high, don't, whatever. And so comes a bit of a struggle, especially also like shame. What does the role shame plays? Like usually where you got trauma, you've got shame. Like when we look at our lives through the lens of shame, it's also really hard to feel good about some of the things that you've done or what you are doing, or you maybe kind of undersell yourself. So I for sure grapple with it. But I also think, we're learning, we're healing, we're growing, we're learning. We don't always have it figured out. It's a slippery slope. So like today I might be like, I'm making my best efforts, Danny, and I'm doing okay. But tomorrow I might be like, not there. And I might be just like I'm failing, I'm a failure, right? So, like, it's a slippery slope, and we have to recognize how everything we do and everything we don't do, everything we've achieved, and maybe things that we haven't where we hold ourselves back, on the things that we wanna do. Everything comes down to choice. Like, I think we don't give ourselves enough credit or accountability when we overlook how much of our life, like, what it is choice, is the result of our choices. You know, when I was up in your community and, at the end of one day, like and I told everyone at the start, "Hey, I'm just a lawyer. I'm definitely not like a social worker, psychologist. This is not therapy, although it might be therapeutic, and I'm not gonna be trauma dumping, and we're not doing that today. I'm just gonna give you some insight into how your brain and your body respond to trauma and how it drives behavior and communication." At the end, there was somebody who was like, what supports were being provided for people to kind of, because she wanted a one-on-one. And I had to remind her, "Hey, I'm, just a lawyer. I'm not a therapist. I can't sit like, I don't know." But what I said was, I mean, you can look to your chief and counsel for certain supports, and maybe funding for programs to help you. But the reality is, every one of us has to take responsibility for our healing. There are things that we can do that should never be dependent on somebody else. Like, no one else can fill us up or make us whole again like we can. Like, no chief and counsel can do that. No spouse can do that. No sibling, no parent, no nothing. Like, it's for us to choose to make ourselves whole again. We have to think about that more, and we have to talk about that more.
I think that could even be the message to future Indigenous law students, because anybody who's interested in going into law, into anywhere in that field, maintain that sense of authenticity, maintain that sense of humanity, this human centric mindset of how are you going to show up, not just for your job, but for yourself. And I think that's definitely a question I've asked myself every single day. How am I going to show up for myself today? But what is your dream for this field? What do you want to tell people interested in the field? Like, where do you want this to go?
Well, I mean, I would like to see people get in touch with their humanity. I would like to see people heal themselves. I think white people need to do a lot of healing. I think white people also need to reflect on their relationship to racism and the role, that their ancestors played in creating, establishing, entrenching, white supremacy and white values in the systems that we currently have to confront as Indigenous people, like the medical profession, the legal profession, so many professions. And they need to heal. And, my friend Angela Starrett talks about that a lot. Like, white people will ask her, usually I think under the umbrella of reconciliation, what do we she's like, "You need to heal." It's like, the more you heal, the less likely maybe you harm us, and, like, that's exactly what has driven my desire to educate the legal system, and it takes time. So, like, anyone who's listening to this, who's young, who's feeling like, "I don't know how to be authentic," or "I don't know that I feel safe to be." Well, maybe because you don't. Maybe because there is no safety yet, but there will be if you just stay the course and you hold the line. Sometimes you have to conform and code switch and to get in the door. But once you're there, and once you have some like independence and freedom, then be yourself. Like, be yourself as much as you can, but don't shame yourself for the times when you can't be who you want to be.
No, we definitely needed to confront that even this past week, being in the medical field, dealing with doctors, nurses, and there was some testing that we were doing on my uncle that I just saw as inhumane. And I was like, stop. And I was forceful and I wasn't loud. I wasn't disrespectful, but it's about learning to advocate for yourself and for your loved ones in an effective way. It is always a powerful experience. Being in the presence of strong Indigenous women who take up space, who share their knowledge, who share the resources we've built. This is a gift. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate this gift. So thank you so much. Mom, how are you doing?
I am well. I mean, we started this podcast with, coming back to Myrna and the story she shared with us in the previous podcast was about her brother. I have to admit, it left me for a few days just sort of thinking about it. And how do we offer our support and our voices to that, to you? Because here's an issue that isn't uncommon that, there are so many things that we can help with. There's a long list of things that people in our position can help with. The way we teach our children, the way we bring up our families. I mean, everything. The whole thing can be addressed. And again, like I said, that happens one person at a time. And if we can help one person find their voice, if we can help one person and tell them that they're worthy, go into that career that, you haven't seen modeled for you. Like you, Myrna, are gonna help lead some of us. You went into that into my community, and, you were saying that I'm just a lawyer, not a therapist, but, in many ways, it's that humanness that you offer to people who are there to listen, offer so much hope to people. Because there sadly, many times when you go into an indigenous organization, a lot of the dysfunction enters that organization also. I work very hard not to judge people for the trauma that they carry. I don't allow people to hurt me. I put little into what people think of me because I've had a lot of criticisms in my life. Here I am with a podcast where, as a child, I was told I talk too much. Guess what? I get paid really well to talk now. Um, I think there's just so much, and it's like we had delved into so much because trauma informed lawyer, big picture trauma, and lawyer is just kind of a scary field that many of us had to wade into. That was many times re-traumatizing, and so being able to deal with the issues that we have, being able to see them, being able to understand them, coming from a kind soul like you offers me a great deal amount of hope. So, yes, Danielle, I am at peace. How are you?
I was feeling pretty scattered. I think we used that word at the beginning of this episode. Um, but there's something so centering, something so inspiring about having these kind of conversations. Like I have the strength to deal with the day again. And that's because strong Indigenous women, it's like, okay, we got this. Let's do it. And so thank you so much, Myrna, for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing really good still. Yeah, like I started off doing really well, and I'm still doing really well. And I just want to say before we wrap that I'm incredibly grateful to the two of you for doing this podcast, like creating this Before I Go podcast. I really think that all that you're offering in the conversations you're having with all the people you invite on is really, it's such a gift to all the listeners. It's such a gift. I feel really honored that I get to be part of your incredibly sacred project. And also, like, after the last conversation, I just kind of felt a little shitty because I was like, "Oh, man, why did I say the things I said?" I mean, I'm not the one who's staring down the barrel of, like, having to choose maid, and making these decisions and facing a disease. But yet I was, like, very open about talking about how just having survived so much violence has left and coming from, the legacy of pain that I carry, left me with, my own mortality and my own commitment and my own will to live. And I was like, "Why the hell did I talk about that?" Because I don't normally talk about that, and I felt, like, really lousy for doing that, but you held space for it, and I appreciate it, and in retrospect, I think it's an important conversation because I do think there's a lot of us who've survived a lot of things in, Indian country, so to speak, who feel the way I feel. I don't think it's just me, and I think your the name of your podcast is so perfect, Before I Go, because I think for many of us, we are always thinking, regardless of whether or not we're facing some something that could bring our lives to an abrupt end, we're always thinking, "But what if, and what is the role that I play in my own life, how I live and how I die?" And it's just such a sacred conversation, and it really the space you created invited me to be authentic and courageous, and I'm just really grateful to the 2 of you, and so thank you so much.
Myrna, thank you for that. There is no right or wrong. Thank you for trusting us with that. A lot of it is, you're right, other people share that experience, other people share that. And I think it's important to talk about. All of it is important. There are times people have questioned, yeah, it doesn't sound like you're talking about MAID. Well, we're talking about the bigger picture of why people are given the agency to choose MAID. And I appreciate you saying that we held space for it, because I certainly hope we would, because the things that you did share with us and the things that you have done in your life is such sacred work. So thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I can't emphasize the importance of having these conversations. You've been incredible. To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. As always, figure out a way to take care of yourself. Self care is mandatory, and it's been a reminder for us these last few days to figure out how to take care of ourselves. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for walking this journey with us.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope our conversations provided a unique perspective, opened the door to your own discussions, and offer some comfort. If you have any questions or would like to learn more about anything we've discussed or haven't discussed, let us know in the comments. Until next time, at Lugo Doyexip Noon. Before I Go gratefully acknowledges the financial support of the Indigenous Screen Office.